Hi, this is the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Today we're talking about the work-life balance in your life. One of the things that's happening this time of year, because we're entering a new year, people are making New Year's resolutions. They're talking about what they want to accomplish in the coming year, talking about all the creative things they want to do, how they're going to work on themselves. And we thought we would just take some time today to talk about this idea of balancing your work, your life, your personal growth, and all of the pieces of your lives that sometimes just seem so disparate, so compartmentalized. How do you deal with it? How do you keep up? And we thought we could riff on this a little bit and then ask for your feedback at the end of this podcast.
Especially when people are super busy. You and I were talking about this before the podcast that people have full-time jobs, they have families, they've got kids, they've got a lot of responsibilities and things pulling them in all different directions. So not only how do you balance that, but especially since we come from a position of personal development, how do you incorporate personal development into all of this, all this other stuff, this stuff that you have to keep up with? How do you make sure that you have a balance there of not just experiencing, burnout from all this stuff that you have to focus on and work on, and you don't have any time to yourself, so you can't say, let's take, for example, starting a workout regime where working out ostensibly gives you more energy. It helps you not experience burnout. But how do you even fit in an exercise regime into your already busy schedule in order to not experience burnout? It feels like just one more thing that will get you closer to burnout. So how do you balance all this stuff? Yeah,
and the other thing, too, that we are dealing with more now than ever, and this is nothing new. You've heard this everywhere, but we're more connected. I literally sleep with my mobile phone next to my bed, which is probably not a good idea. I probably should change that habit, but I have it right there. What happens if, my ex-wife needs to get hold of me for my kids or something? I think that it's going to be a good tie to the outside world. But when I wake up in the morning, I'll reach for my phone, and oftentimes you'll see your emails before you even get out of bed to start your day. You haven't even brushed your teeth, and here you've got an email, like for our example, a customer service email that came in, and it sets my day off in a direction that I wasn't necessarily intending. I'm more reactionary first thing in the morning than being proactive about my day because I'm so connected to the world, social media, email, all these things. So considering the technological and communicative connectedness we have, combined with just the amplified busy schedules we're going through, this is a challenge. This is something that, I don't think any of our ancestors had to deal with ever until the last maybe 30 to 15, 30 years.
Yeah.
At this level.
At this level with the over-communicated component, for sure. The work-life balance, I think that's probably something that's been a phenomenon in the last maybe 60 to 100 years. I don't think people really had to deal with that when they were in small little villages in France, your work-life balance. You go be a cobbler and then you come home.
Well, and I think the work-life balance wasn't so difficult when there was clear definition around everything. It was... You got up, you got to work at 9. You didn't have a computer at home to check your email after work, so you had to leave your work at 5 o'clock when you left. If you were working a desk job or if you were working a factory job, even more so. You came home and then that was family time. So it was like society and everything kind of supported it. Things were closed after a certain hour at night. Weekends, things weren't open, so you had to spend time with your family. You were the structure of our civilization, I think, supported more of this work-life balance just by everybody had the same days off and all this.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm probably totally tangenting here, but I'm wondering if we entered a space of having a difficulty balancing these two things because of the industrial age. I mean, we just recently watched a documentary on the Prohibition and how, the reason why people were for Prohibition is because, the immigrants that had these ridiculous schedules and these incredibly miserable and unsafe factory jobs would take their money on the way home and get raging drunk and then come home and beat their wives because they had such terrible lives. That was probably a difficult work-home life balance they were trying to deal with. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this concept, maybe not consciously sprang from that, but the Industrial Revolution, we're still living with echoes of it
Yeah.
in so many different contexts, like the school system. I mean, why do we have bells? Well, bells were initially to teach children to respond to bells in industrial jobs.
It's like Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, so we even 100 years after or 100 and some odd years after the Industrial Revolution, we're still feeling some of the aftermath, some of the echoes of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if our work-life balance in at least this country started to become really confused around that time period, and we're still attempting to find that balance.
Yeah. Well, and if you've done any traveling at all, like to Europe or other countries, I feel like the United States, and now there are other countries that are this way too, but the United States definitely, where we live, we have an intensity of work. I don't think we're as lifestyle focused as maybe some other cultures and countries.
Oh, tragically.
Where, like I'm in Europe and like, Southern Europe, and things shut down in the afternoon for people just to chill out, like drink coffee and play checkers, and it just like shops are closed from like 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock. People seem to have more of their lives are more integrated in a sense of how they go through. They realize that what are we sprinting toward, our own death, or are we going to enjoy life as we go through? And I think we can learn a lot in our culture, our Western, United States culture from some other cultures and lifestyles around the world.
Yeah, I have an acquaintance that sells information around weight loss, and she's done it through the lens of pleasure. She calls it the pleasure eating boot camp or something. I can't remember exactly the phrase. And she just wrote a book. It was just published actually, and it's all about pleasurable weight loss. And so she made a Facebook comment about, New Year's resolution. Are you creating New Year's resolutions for yourself that are grueling, or are you creating New Year's resolutions that are pleasurable and it will be easy to keep because you've framed them in the context of pleasure? And when I read that, I was thinking, man, this country has such a knee-jerk response to the concept of pleasure. I think it's because of our very, early patriarchal, farmer roots, where life was supposed to be a struggle. And if it's not a struggle, then you're doing something wrong, right?
Or you're not going to be prepared for winter. If you don't struggle hard through the growing season, the harvest season, you're going to starve this winter. So there's no time for pleasure right now.
Yeah. And then on top of that, it's hedonistic to have pleasure. An aesthetic lifestyle is the approved lifestyle by, God. And so there's this really knee-jerk response to the concept of pleasure. And I think this country was built on that. And so we don't really think in terms of pleasure and lifestyle and slowing down and, being in the moment. We think in terms of like, go, 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 have to get to the next stage. I mean, it's just like all these type A personalities have gotten together and like decided that that's what the culture is supposed to be like. And so it's difficult to create a balance because we've been so programmed, right? Like just at the, from the time we are tiny, we've been so programmed that we're either go, go, go and winners, or we are the loser that's going to become, the McDonald's worker or the janitor. Not even questioning whether or not the janitor has an extremely pleasurable lifestyle of being able to clock in, clock out, go home, and then do whatever they want to when they get home. So I think that there's a lot of deep programming around not being able to slow down and not really being able to have a balance.
You mentioned New Year's resolutions. I don't think we've ever talked about this before. Have you ever set New Year's? I know last year as a family, we set a family mantra, and we had a theme for the year. But as far as New Year's resolutions, are you somebody that sets New Year's resolutions for yourself? And have you done that historically, or is that something that never really been on your radar?
I don't sit down and write New Year's resolutions. I get a concept of what I need to be working on, or like something that is a lack in my life, and I focus my attention on that, on healing or repairing or working on that particular thing. So last year, our mantra was abundant self-reliance as a family. And that was because that was in part what I wanted to work on. I wanted to work on being totally self-reliant, building a business to a point where I didn't have to have, I didn't have to rely on anything extra to be able to sustain my business. Like I wanted to make sure that the business was at a point where we were totally self-reliant in all ways. And so that was the focus for the year, and that's what I focused on.
And we did that for the whole family. It was kind of a family theme and then a mantra. Mm-hmm. And then, my two boys were working on certain things about independence in their lives. Mm-hmm. Our 2-year-old daughter was working on some independence in her life. So we all kind of rallied around this mantra. If you actually listen to the very first podcast we ever did, we talked about this. Podcast number 1, we talked about a family mantra. And then there's also an accompanying article on our website about it, how to go through and think about this rallying cry for your family, or you could also apply it to business or just yourself if you're by yourself. This idea of kind of an intention for the year. So it's not so goal specific as like a New Year's resolution. I think those are more like, okay, I'm going to accomplish X, Y, Z, and then you work toward that goal. This is more like a rallying theme of sorts.
Yeah, like an overarching, something to tackle or to focus on. One thing that I personally have, I don't really have a lot of theory around how to create really good life-work balance. What I do is I just try to keep sort of a litmus test, or keep my finger on the pulse of how different components of my life are doing. And if I'm working on one, then probably another one's going to be a little neglected. And then when I've beefed that first one up, then now I go focus on the thing that's been neglected. Mm-hmm. I think I have this concept of first things first, second things not at all. Like, I'm going to focus on one thing at a time. And I recognize that, just the power, or through the powerful engagement, it means that I'm going to, by definition, not be engaging in other things. And so I don't really know if I personally do a full-scale balance on everything. Like, I try to keep doing all these things all at the same time. I'm not very good at that. Yeah. So I try to beef one up and get it to a really well manageable working level. And then I focus on another thing and I try to get that one up into a manageable working level. And then I go to the next thing and I try to get that up to a manageable working level. And then, oh, look, that thing that I got up to a manageable working level before, now it's been neglected. So I need to go focus on that thing. And I just really try to focus on one thing at a time. I just really try to make it so that I'm not juggling everything at the same. I mean, obviously there's going to be some juggling that happens in life naturally and organically, but I don't really try to do my personal development projects on multiple things at a time. I try to do them on one thing at a time.
I have a theory about work-life balance, and I kind of practice this, and part of it's probably my upbringing. I actually think that work-life balance is bullshit. I think it's completely a constructed, non-workable ideal, especially in our current modern world and emerging world, because everything is becoming a mashup. Everything is becoming more and more integrated. We're combining and joining everything together. This notion of work-life balance, I believe, breaks down very quickly. And so instead of thinking about the word balance as what we're targeting, I think what is actually better, and people might have umbrage with this at first when they hear this, but instead of balance, I think integration, work-life integration, is actually going to be the new way of seeing the work-life balance. In other words, instead of trying to compartmentalize, okay, I leave work at 5 o'clock, here in the United States, the end of the workday is usually about 5 p.m., I leave work at 5 o'clock and then I go home to my family or to my girlfriend or boyfriend, or I go with my friends. Like, then that's my social time. And I'm not saying that you should work after 5 and like work 24 hours a day. And I'm not saying you should party for 24 hours a day. I'm saying try to integrate those two things together in your life. That's tricky because obviously your friends don't work with you. But what would happen if you took more control of how you go about making money and producing resource, so your life can be more integrated? And that might not happen right away. That might be something you work toward. But I believe integration is more the key than separation or than the balance aspect. So for example, let's say you're going on a business trip and it would make sense for you to take your 15-year-old son with you to build a relationship. It's a 3-day business trip. You have a couple meetings to go to, but your son could maybe sit in the waiting room during those meetings, but then you guys are in a new city together and you fly together. So now you've incorporated some element of your personal life with your business life, and your son would get to see you going to this meeting, see what your life is like, and vice versa. Your son has some kind of a maybe school event or something where you end up going and attending that with him. So it's this idea of finding ways to integrate life together. And I don't have all the answers for this. This is something I'm working on. This is kind of a hypothesis that I'm working on personally, to see life, because I don't think you can separate. I think you have to keep it. It's going to be impossible going forward to separate these things. So we got to figure out solutions of how to integrate these better and not be overwhelmed by them and not see them as these separate things that, I do this over here and then I come and do this over here.
I agree. I think that's a great way of looking at it. For me, one of the things that makes it easy for somebody like me to agree with that and say, yeah, that's totally the way to go, is because I've spent the last 5 years building a business that allows me to do that completely.
Absolutely.
You know, like I decided that was going to be important to me, to have flexibility and control over my time. And so, not that I have like total control of my time. There's some things I have to do at certain time periods because I've scheduled them, but I had the luxury of scheduling them. And so it becomes a lot easier to integrate my career, my job, because I own my business. You know, you and I co-own this business. And so it becomes a lot easier for us to integrate those. That said, I mean, there's a lot of people who do jobs where they're not even allowed to make personal phone calls during the day at work, right? Like how it becomes really difficult to integrate your life when the job itself is creating such harsh boundaries. But I don't think that necessarily means you can't do any integration. I think what you can do is create personal development goals that incorporate all of those components. You know, the whole concept of being present to no matter what you're doing, that personal development goal of just being fully present. That means when you're at your job, right? If you don't work for somebody else, I mean, if you work for somebody else and you don't work for yourself, then when you're at your job, being fully present at your job means that you're going to do the highest quality job for them possible. And that means that you're probably going to get more rewards. You're going to be recognized, right? Like, or not necessarily. I mean, there's plenty of thankless jobs where being fully present at your job is not going to give you any reward. But that said,
internal reward.
Yeah, you'll get more intrinsic reward. You'll do a better job. You'll be picking up better skills, right, for whatever comes next. And then when you go home, being fully present with the people in your life that you love, right? Mm-hmm. Like just that one personal development project integrates all of those components because you're being fully present with whoever you're with. When you're with your kids, being fully present with your kids. When you're with your mate or your spouse, being fully present with them. When you're with your friends, being fully present with them, your family members, etc. And so even if you don't get a lot of time with these people, the time you get, right, even if your quantity is low, your quality is high. And the higher quality time you spend with all of these people, the more intimacy you're going to create, the better all of the relationships become. So even if you feel like your life enforces this concept of really segregating all these components, right? Just implementing presence, right? Being fully present. That's a way to integrate all of these components because you're the one thing that always stays the same, right? The better you become as a person, the better it's going to bleed out to all of these other pieces. So the more you can work on yourself in that presence level, the more you are going to be able to not just have work-life balance, but integrate all of these components.
I think that's an absolutely fundamentally great point because you're right. There are circumstances that prevent some of the things I'm talking about in principle. And I think it's more of a principle of integration than it is the actuality of you have to have your family at work with you or bring your work home at night or like, I don't mean necessarily it's, and again, it's a hypothesis. It's more of a working principle than anything. And I think that's a great way to look at it is finding ways to integrate in the midst of those structural limitations. And it's brilliant that you brought that up. And I think if you're listening here, you're hanging out with us right now listening, you're most likely interested in personal development. You're probably listening to Personality Hacker because we talk about personal development issues. We talk about growing yourself. We do it through the lens of personality typology and other models of human development. But fundamentally, Personality Hacker is about being part of your personal growth and your personal development journey. And I think one of the things that Antonia just mentioned is really key, is looking for ways to take something you want to work on this year, personal development-wise, and fully integrating that into all areas of that work-life balance. Because in that way, you're setting yourself up for someday when that principle can now apply to a structural difference and you can integrate more of your work-life balance.
Yeah, I would say that should be a goal. If you're in a job that doesn't even allow you to make personal phone calls, you're probably not super happy there. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not a job that's really, like, those kinds of companies, corporations that make those sorts of prohibitions on people's lifestyle, they're going the way of the dodo. Like, other companies like Google and Zappos and
Well, Virgin just announced that you have unlimited vacations when you work for the Virgin companies.
Virgin and
You can take unlimited time off as long as you get responsibilities done.
And Hulu, you were just reading about Hulu in CEO magazine, right?
It was a Fast Company, I believe.
Fast Company. Okay, so Hulu's the same. I mean, like all these companies are starting to create environments that are way more freeform, and it's because they acknowledge that people need that.
Yeah.
Like they're acknowledging that people need a work-life integration, not a work-life balance. So I totally agree with that. And my guess is that these companies that are really strict and harsh, we're going to see them for a while because that's been the standard for the last, few decades. But I don't think I think they're going to have to change. They're going to have to catch up.
Well, to attract talent because their jobs are floating and moving around so fast.
Exactly. So if you're in a position where, like Joel just said, logistically you can't do the full integration, you should totally leave it open that you might move to a different position, a different company that will acknowledge that, and then you can definitely create this life-work integration process, not just life-work balance.
Something just came to mind that I hadn't actually considered until we started talking on this podcast, that this idea of compartmentalization might appeal to some people. This idea of I get to get up in the morning. I love my family. I love my kids. I love my spouse. But I love the ability to close that off for 8 hours, go to work and change my complete environment, talk to a totally different set of people, have that part of my life, and then close that off and then come home and then have my family part of my life or my loving friendship relationships, whatever that looks like. There probably are some people listening. If you're listening and this is you, that probably does appeal to you. You might have the proclivity toward that. There might be, as we talk about personality types, we understand that people are very different and everybody has different needs, different desires, different wants. There are probably people that feel very much, I don't think you and I have that sense, so it doesn't hit me intuitively to say, oh yeah, work-life balance. But I think people do appreciate that segmented parts of them. Mm-hmm. I think that is something that we have to take into consideration, that not everybody's looking toward that full integration or anything like that. They almost want it to be separate places so then they can close one off and then deal with the other and not combine them.
Yeah, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that either. Then it is a matter of balancing things. Then it's a matter of making sure that you're getting your needs met as well as the needs of these other parts of your life met. And then it is a balancing act. And then that's when I would go back to what I said before, which for me personally, full engagement and full focus on one thing at a time is generally, presence while you're there, being fully present in whatever is the current context, being fully present in that moment, giving it your all, and then focus, like noticing when one thing is getting maybe lacking attention, giving it some attention. And then when, you've got that full and working and maintenance, then you focus on another thing. I think that's the only I don't really know how else to do it. There's probably people out here who, there might be people who are listening. You might be somebody who has figured this out completely. Like, we're riffing because we're talking about the things that have worked for us. But we would love to hear what other people have to say about this concept of work-life balance versus work-life integration, and what has worked for you. Like, what have you done in order to create, some sort of rhythm for your life that works for you and everybody around you, especially in what Joel mentioned is this really super over-communicated time period where we're so tethered to all of these different devices, all these different communication streams. We're so tethered to our email and to our phones and to all the social media channels. How do you create balance with all of that? Do you just say no to some stuff, or do you integrate, or do you focus on one thing at a time? What's worked for you?
Yeah, so I have three things to say. First of all, riffing on what you just said with being present, I don't think, for some reason, I think as humans, we have a sense that quantity is always a good thing. So when I'm with my kids, I could be kind of hanging with my kids at the playground and trying to check email. And so quantitatively, I'm doing two tasks now. This idea of multitasking. I'm able to check email, maybe do customer service emails while my kids are playing on the playground or whatever. And I've really tried to make it a point to not look at quantity as my metric, but look more at quality. Maybe have fewer relationships, fewer experiences and things of this nature, but when I have them, make them more quality. And you alluded to this earlier. So I really, just as a basic example, and I think most people can resonate with this, your smartphone, if you're in a conversation with somebody and someone's calling you or trying to text you, this is going to be the toughest thing you probably do all year. Just stay present. Like, just put that away and be present with the people in your life that you're engaged with in real time. That phone call or that text will be there in 20 to 30 minutes when you're done with your current conversation, especially if the other person's talking at that point. Like, to reach down and check your phone while someone's talking to you, it just breaks rapport. It breaks presence. Think about how the world could really be more connected if people stay more connected when they're with each other as real people, because all those other connections, they feel real on your devices, but they are synthetic connections. They're just reading off a screen. It appears to be a real connection, but that real human sitting across from you is a much more real connection than that digital device of some text that just popped through. So I just wanted to mention that because that really hit me when you said that earlier, and that's a practice in my life that I'm really working on to stay present and focused when I'm with people. The other thing that you said I think was brilliant is this idea of doing one thing at a time. I think we overestimate how much we can do. So I don't really set, and this is the second thing I was going to say, is I don't really set New Year's resolutions for myself. I used to sit down kind of around the first of the year and write a bunch of stuff out. And what would happen is I'd make this big list of like 15 things, like, oh yeah, I want to do this year and this year. And I'd get this huge list. And it was so overwhelming and so many things on it. It was so idealistic. There was no way I would ever be able to accomplish the things that were on that list, or to achieve the things, or to work on the things that are on the list. It was just too comprehensive. And then I got to the thing where I had this experience also where, October would roll around and I'd start thinking about what I wanted to do in the new year. And so I would start making my list early, and then I'd sit that list to the side and then try to pick that up January 1st. And then work on those things. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Why am I delaying starting on something I want to work on? So it's this idea of paring down something to the basics, like one or two things you want to work on this year. And then as soon as you get the idea to work on that, why wait till the new year starts? And the new year's a great time to generate that list. But I have things that happen throughout the year that I'm like, I really start right away. Write it down and start your quote unquote New Year's resolution October 1st or July 1st or July 27th. It doesn't matter when you come up with the idea or whatever you want to work on. Start right away. Don't wait. Don't delay getting started on developing yourself. So I think those two things, the power of full engagement, I think you hit on is really powerful, because you're able to give it your focus and attention. And it kind of like this podcast started out like New Year's resolutions, and I think we talked a lot about presence and attention as we've been going. So this is kind of a theme coming up, and I don't know if this is just for us or if you're listening, this is something you sense as well as part of like a collective consciousness. But focusing on one thing, starting now, and then just go for it. Like, get there and stay present.
Yeah. I would love to hear other people's ideas on this. We riffed on it. It probably sounded like we were kind of all over the place with talking about, well, you should integrate. Well, no, you should, or not should, but you could integrate, or you could balance life and business, or your family and your business. And there's multiple avenues to come at this. There's multiple schools of thought. There's multiple ways of doing it. I think this is really where you see people's individual personalities becoming important. We get a lot of recommendations for how to live our lives, and they're not always personality context sensitive. Mm-hmm. So it really is going to depend on what's worked for you before. However, I'd love to hear suggestions from people on how they create this balance or this integration, or keeping things higher quality as opposed to just quantity, or saying no to opportunities or no to, things in their life and saying yes to only a few things. I'd love to hear what people are doing. Yeah,
let us know your focus this year. Do you create New Year's resolutions? Do you have something you work on every year? Have you just gone away with the whole New Year's resolution thing, or the whole working on something or achieving something this year? And have you figured out a work-life balance? Do you like having things compartmentalized? Feedback. We want to hear from you. We want to know what your thoughts are on this topic. And even if you have like I could never do what you're saying because of blah, 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 your excuses. I want to hear your excuses too, because it helps me get an idea of where people are at and how we can at Personality Hacker make better and better communication that can help more and more people develop themselves and grow as people in their lives. We have a Facebook page, growing community over at Facebook. Every day we've got people liking the page, commenting, being a part of that community. Facebook.com/personalityhacker, Twitter.com/personalityhack, HACK. They wouldn't let us get the whole hacker in there, so it's just personality hack. And of course, our website has a great place to come and take a personality test to find out your personality. You can also read articles, listen to more podcasts there, connect with us, find out about all the products and services that we have and all the free resources we have over at the website personalityhacker.com.
If you like our podcast, we would love to hear your review. Please go to iTunes and rate us on iTunes and let us know how you feel about the Personality Hacker podcast.
Yes, my name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This has been the Personality Hacker Podcast, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.